So I can deliver that. I would say like that's one of the reasons like in concept form that I like this program is because I can tell somebody exactly why that happened. You know, they have this amount of experience, they log these many hours.
Which is fine, like I just want to be able to answer to it.
Yep.
Like why, such a jump, and maybe it's the catch up.
Yep.
The other thing is, I think it was on slide 6, we talk about the union, like what is their timing? Like if they say, oh, you're getting those raises, we want them to. Like, is there like a certain like month that just says next contract negotiations 2025? Or like, no matter what gets negotiated, it goes into place certain day just to align with our annual budget?
Yeah, I don't have like they have to say something by a drop dead date. I would say that the closer that you get to adopting the preliminary levy, the harder it gets to,
Okay.
Because obviously you can't go up from there. And I think it would be a challenge to like put a placeholder.
No, that answers it, that's helpful too, to say like, nope, we committed to this for the levy, like, we can't do more this year.
And I'm not
I
gonna
would
get into
offer
that,
that
yeah.
to me it feels like unless they called tomorrow and said we want to start talking, it's a
Yeah.
lengthy process.
Yeah.
So realistically, in my mind, and I could be wrong, this is in 2026 at the earliest
Okay.
budgeting.
I just didn't know if there was like, if we were, when we talked about 2025, if we were like 7 months out, or are we like 21 months out? So
I could be
that
wrong,
helps.
and things could change, but in my mind,
But I would like
for
to keep
union,
an eye on
I don't
that.
see that
Sure.
as 2025. You good?
Yeah.
Kristen?
I do, okay, so I like this. It is a fairly well-known way when you work in the public sector, that if you want to get paid higher and more, you quit one city and you go to another. And that's the only way it works. I've personally done it, I know that. But you can't, because there isn't, besides your step and your, COLA, that you can't reach these potentials unless you switch jobs and go to another city. Job retention has been something that we've talked about many times for many years about how we keep employees here. So I do like most everything that is in here. I'm a little nervous with the full milestone placement when we look at the fact that could, if the union went along with this, that we brought them on, we could be, is my understanding right that number could be, we have to include 10 more employees in that, so we'd be looking at possibly like a $250,000 addition to our budget, and that's a lot of money to stick in the next budget that comes around.
But I truly, again, unless they call tomorrow and say we want to start renegotiating the contract, I don't think it would be a budget impact until 2026 for the union folks.
That's fine.
And
It's
this is a
still-
2025 number. I get it.
Yeah,
but
it's still
I
a big
just
chunk, because it
wanna
doesn't
make that
just,
clear.
then that's continuous, right? We don't
Yeah.
just say, oh, here's your money, and now we pull
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
That has to be included in for all the years to come too, so. I like it. I'm for sure on board with the milestone +1 for the new scale. I don't know that I'm fully comfortable considering that we might be doubling that last number or more. So, we'd have to see how that would fit into the budgeting. But other than that, it looks good.
And we'll have some more specific numbers in the classification and compensation study that, because they're still kind of finishing that up, so you might see these numbers tweaked the next time you see them. So just a little caveat.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything in the presentation. It does seem that there's not enough movement within the range, and this looks like at least a very good start of, like, there's deterministic things, there's some subjective things, so I think it's very helpful for the employee to know where they stand and what they need to do. And then again, just echoing what else is just, it's just purely budget, right? I mean, I think if we can swing it, obviously, I'd like the full thing, but maybe if it's a little phase it in over a 2-year with the initial milestone, then like a 2 jump or something on 2026, just to maybe smooth out the initial impact. But I definitely think we can find the 71,000 for that +1, and then just again, see what it looks like, to see if we can get everyone up to the full.
I think there's a real benefit in ROI to this too.
Oh, yeah.
If we're, the city, what their city receives in productivity, efficiency, and creativity, moving supporters and observers to top contributors and leaders, the hope is we get everybody there. I think we'll reap the rewards from this more than the dollar amount that is part of this program.
Yeah, and Brent shared the employee survey results with everybody. They came back phenomenal, like amazing results.
Yeah.
So our folks are happy here. The thing that'll still make them walk, regardless of how happy they are, is the city of Chaska dangling a $10,000 carrot for them to walk across the street.
Yeah.
So I think that this gives us a little bit more competitiveness, a little bit more recognition of their skills and tenure and, how they rate on the review process. So I just really like it.
Yeah, it's really good work.
Yeah, it's disheartening to say when you've got people who've been here for 20 years and in this section, they'll never reach it, right?
Right, to
Again,
keep it, yeah, the goalposts keep moving, that's not cool.
Is that what you need, Brent?
Thank you.
Cool, thanks.
More to come.
Awesome. All right, item number 3, under drain construction update on a water treatment facility, which I once saw abbreviated as WTF, which was.
It's spelled like that a little bit recently, hasn't it?
That's all right. We've had to change our little abbreviations into the text, the world of texting. So yes, that's been
Sometimes a bummer.
brought
All
up
right.
a few times, but yeah, and as you said, there's sometimes it feels like it, but again, we're back talking about the water system here, but at this point here, I think we've got a predictable path ahead. So it hasn't exactly been easy to get to this point of understanding what we had going on, but I think we're at that point now. So we have we've got the under drains that failed, 1 and 2. That was the existing system. I think we know largely what was driving some of this, and we've got the under drain install that needs to happen. We've got the date scheduled for the filter media replacement at the end of May. The big question that we're getting is, okay, this was supposed to be done by the end of May. That was the general plan and intent, and that was the plan for the contractor and, quite frankly, everyone. At this point, what I can tell you is they got behind on the supply of the media based on some issues with the media supplier. Just some order glitches that have delayed it a little bit. They turned around and got another supplier on board. We're expecting to get the media on site here, hopefully the first week of June. So it's going to be planned for the end of May that gets delivered. At that point here, we're into June to put the media in and get these things back on. And so what we've been watching very closely is the peak demand conditions in June. Whether or not we had any concerns. First questions we're going to get obviously would be, is there any issues with watering? Any type of a watering restriction that would be associated with this, emergency services. I think I can say pretty definitively to both questions that no, we're not thinking that that's where we're at. At this point, what we're going to be dealing with is we're going to be pushing those filters really to their max design capacity for the month of June. And so we're trying to get these things up and running as quickly as we can. So that's going to be probably the mid to end of June that we expect 1 and 2 to be online. The very peak day that we saw last year was 1.7. That was in August, later in the season. Earlier in the year, we got up to about 1.4. We can get these
Mr.
filters.
What's 1.7, what's 1.4?
Million gallons per day. And so what we're really looking at is what the capacity of those 2 filters are before we have to get into a position of what we call blending water. And so we wouldn't be restricting water, we would be blending water, which we take raw well water and we put it into the system, and we just supplement the filtered water with the raw well water. That being said, at this point, we don't see a scenario in which we can't feed everything through these two filters. When we'll run those filters to their max design capacity, run about 20 plus hours a day for that peak day is really what it comes down to. So we'd have to get into a situation that we wouldn't historically expect in any way, shape, or form before we even have to get into blending water. But that would be at this point what we would consider to be the worst case, where you effectively take the raw well water and you send it into the system. That is not cloudy water, it's not dirty water. If you had a house and you had these wells, you would drink it and you wouldn't think anything of it. That being said, it's higher than we would normally filter to.
Sure.
And so that's really what it comes down to. We're filtering the iron and manganese down such that you don't get any of the staining and such from the manganese over time. So it's really 5-10% blending, worst case scenario, if we see something that would quite frankly be epically unusual at this point. So we're expecting 1 and 2 to be online by end of June, based on the media delivery date that we're confident in. They're doing a few last things to get the under drains ready for installation, making sure the pressures are where they're supposed to be, to make sure that the new under drain is operating within spec. And that is the majority of the update here. And once we move past 1 and 2, getting that online, we're going to do a few verifications to filters 3 and 4, make sure that we have a stable operating condition, and if there's any issues that need to be attended to, we're probably going to be running all through this summer as it's set up here. So that's the gist of the update here. Understanding I'm probably going to get a few questions.
All right, who's got questions?
I'll go first.
Go ahead, Reed.
So I know we're also planning to do some water tower maintenance. Obviously, we don't want to have that overlap with filters being out of commission, right? Because that provides our buffer capacity.
Yeah.
So what was the timeline for that? We're going to have to push it to the fall, we think, or do you think we could have enough capacity with the filters, with all 4 filters running in, say, August to do the water tower work then, or?
So the water tower project is currently out to bid right now, so we haven't even received bids for that yet. Given what I know of current contractor schedules doing water tower coating projects, I don't think that we're probably gonna see that this summer regardless.
Okay.
But I do have some language built into that, into those specs, about taking the tower offline during peak demand season. So we'd be working with the contractor if we thought that was gonna be an issue.
Okay. And then just my engineering brain here. So when you say like running the filter at peak capacity, right? You need to backwash it every so often, right? Is that basically we run it, like you said, say it's 20 hours, right? You run it for the day it used up 75% of the water tower's capacity, right? So then you'd run the filter for 20 hours to replenish the water tower and get your, buffer and your peak gallons per day.
Yeah.
Something like that, roughly.
Yeah, pretty close. I mean, generally speaking, it's just you're talking water in and water out of the system, and so the tower's providing the pressure, and when the demand starts getting over and above what we're putting back up, at that point, you're out of your filter capacity. In other words, if it's drawing down more than you're putting through those filters, you're starting to lose.
Drain the tower.
And
okay.
Under that scenario, we're not going to let the tower go down. We're going to pump raw water, and that would be again beyond what we saw on the peak day of last year in August, and it would have to be a sustained duration before we'd have that condition where we'd be using the wells directly. But ultimately, what it means is we're running those filters more hours per day than we would like to if we were to say this is the ideal for the entire summer. It's going to be running them whatever, 20, 22 hours a day.
Sure.
And then that's still plenty of time to backwash.
Okay.
However, we do like to have some downtime built into the general operation.
Sure.
So that's why I say it's really the peak operating capacity.
And then again, we don't expect that running them at this high capacity would degrade their future efficiency, right?
No, that's, I mean, the filtering is down. I mean, that's just they're draining it through the sand. All that comes down to is we talked about charging the green sand and such. That's really that's the removal efficiency of those filters is that green sand. So we're running more water through them, but that's really what they
That's
do.
what it's supposed to Okay, yeah,
So
exactly.
I would say not differently than Ed. We had 4 filters and we were still
Still
running
running,
that much
same
water
one.
through there. It's
Okay.
still- Yep.
Chrissy?
So when we're talking about blending well water in with the city water, does it become treated once it blends in? Is that what is happening? So we have to pull off well to replenish what if we get down too low. Does that then go through the system with all of the chemicals of fluoride, chlorine, all of those things too? Or how does that mix in with the water that's there?
Yeah, I mean, the plant's built in to have a bypass, where you basically can bypass the filters. And so, yeah, I mean, we can add chlorine and such. But if, like Shakopee, for example, they don't have water treatment facilities. They've got raw water that they pump in chlorine and some corrosion inhibitors and such, and that's their system. They don't have exactly ideal water in some portions of the city. But that being said, they certainly are able to do that and still meet Department of Health standards. And so, yes, I mean, it would be taking care of whatever we need for Department of Health
So
standards.
what's coming out of people's faucets would still be treated?
Yeah, it's suitable for Department of Health standards, and we could put that water out there. With our filtration, we're largely treating for aesthetic standards of iron and manganese.
Okay. And do we have any issues then if we're coming straight out of well with arsenic or other things that we find in groundwater sometimes?
No, that would be a different issue. We'd be if we had something that we considered to be a health hazard that has to be treated to release, we'd be having a slightly different conversation about what we think the backup plan would be.
Okay.
And so no, you're not dealing with Department of Health issues as far as the water. It's being treated largely cosmetically, and as you've heard, that's still a big issue for a lot of calls.
Okay. Just don't make a city of Blaine out of us. I trusted you not to make a city of Blaine.
No, you and I both.
Lori?
Believe me.
Yes, it's not, this is a new thing, right? Like, we haven't done this before.
Meaning what? Yeah, we have.
Just say, oh, when the water, like, demand is really high, we'll just kind of add some well water and bypass some of
No.
ours.
No, we haven't had to, and I'm not expecting to have to this time.
So it's
I'm
more
I'm
like,
just trying to
it's like
say,
a backup,
if
if
we-
we need to do this.
if we had, I'm just trying to say, that is what we would consider to be our backup scenario if something grossly went wrong. We're not looking at having any type of an issue where we're not gonna supply
We
emergency
did
services and
previously
such.
blend maybe like 10 years ago, when the water tower by Mills Fleet Farm was kind of used as a backup for high flow days. So we do have some experience blending in that regard.
Okay.
But it hasn't been for some time.
And then if it does need to be like turned on or implemented, is it a 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks? Like,
Oh, no, it's
Or-
an immediate thing. It's like, we've got
oh,
multiple.
and how long does it last? Is it more just about when,
Well, you'd probably seen that for a day if
kind of
something.
when the demand is up?
If we had something that was highly unusual, you'd be talking about a day or two,
Okay.
probably at best, and then
Okay.
most of it, it's gonna be blasted out of irrigation, because that's what drives all of our high flows anyway, and it's
At that
gonna be
time,
on
okay.
grass
That makes me feel much more
within a
comfortable.
couple of
So it's-
hours, so.
Okay. And then, would I be correct to say like the priorities are that we meet the requirements for, state health standards?
Yep.
And then the next is just that we actually have water supply for, and then you think of all the worst case scenarios.
Yep.
And then third is the aesthetics.
Yeah, so no issues with the emergency services. That's completely supply based, and we're in a strong position
Take
of
care of
supply.
that first.
Yeah, so, and then, as far as the aesthetics, again, as I mentioned, this stuff's gonna end up on a lawn.
Yes.
And honestly, if I could actually build the system ideally without the additional costs, being the concern, I would actually irrigate with raw well water and skip the cost of having to treat the water. Because you are effectively treating water to a higher quality standard to put it on grass. And sometimes grass doesn't really care what the water looks like. If it's got manganese, that might be bad for the toilet, you know, so.
Yes.
But anyway,
It's hard
as
to
far
do. We don't want the
as-
slides.
You're not gonna see,
But
you're not
this
gonna
helps
see
me
aesthetic issues
to
because it's
know
gonna be irrigated.
That we're aligned on like the triage or the priorities. I don't know, like worst case scenario, how long, so
Yeah,
that helps
no.
me if somebody asks.
Yep, no problem.
So, I support it and sounds like something we should, move forward with. Eric?
Okay, sounds good.
All of my single malt versus blended water questions have been answered. And so I don't see any design specification changes, it's just a delay and we're working through that. You've communicated that, I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, it is a delay, and they're trying to get it back on track here, and I can't really tell you other than the fact that there's a lot of demand for green sand out there right now across the entire area, and that's where it's at.
Thank you.
Just some of the stuff I've shared with you before, Dan was just saying it in a public forum, is that, like, this is a bummer that this is pushed back a couple of months and makes me a little bit nervous. My one question that I asked Dan was, we had a really mild winter, spring is moving along very quickly and is very early, it feels like I'm planting my tomatoes and it's not even Mother's Day. Are we gonna experience kind of the same thing? Do we anticipate having a peak quicker or sooner than it was last year? And I think that's where it came out in this memo, that the peak last year was 1.7 and that was in August. So even if it is a month earlier, let's say, that's still gonna hit in July, and that's gonna be well in advance of when this is completed. Reel me in if I'm getting this.
I think you're spot on.
And then I think my only other thing was, I think everything with, let's see, I'm getting the filters wrong, but 1 and 2, those are the ones that are working right now, or?
3 and 4 are working.
I'm sorry,
3
so
and 4.
3 and 4, so anything that needs to be done with 3 and 4 potentially, I just wanna make sure that we don't go through this. Are we gonna make it? When's it gonna get finished? Like, if there is any repair that needs to be done, let's revisit this on Labor Day and, you know, get our green sand order in early. Like, heaven forbid, I think that's worst case scenario, and I truly hope that won't be the case, but let's make sure that we're not making all of us nervous in late June next year if there needs to be a repair like this again.
Agreed. We would fully plan to be running all 4 filters all summer, and you know, they'll be topped out with sand, and we'll be in strong shape for capacity and treatment through the summer. And again, we're, you know, hopefully by fall we're not giving you any updates outside of what the last update would be, is that we're done.
Outstanding. Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, moving on, conservation area signage discussion. Mr. Anderson, it looks like you have 18 minutes, which
I think we
seems
can
like you
get her
can get a
done.
solid start. Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Mayor and Council. Good evening. So what we have for you tonight to take a look at is a draft policy related to these conservation areas. And just a little background, which is in the memo, but I'll give kind of a high-level overview. There's dozens of these conservation area signs sort of sprinkled throughout the community. We started, as I understand it, placing them around 2016 with new developments, and there's been a lot of development since then. So these developers, when they're installing various features, whether stormwater features or if there's just bluff areas or other environmental features that are protected within a development, we've required them to place signage up. And Brenda, I don't know if you can pull up the agenda. I just want to, maybe if we can, at no rush, but when you have a chance, put the depiction of the sign, existing sign up there, just so we can take a look at it. But, you know, historically we have used this same sign regardless of what types of features are placed behind it or what types of features it's meant to identify. And so, as I indicated in the report, I talked to Brent, this was a few months ago, and we've seen a couple inquiries come in recently even, but staff just receives a lot of questions about these areas. What does the sign mean? It's in my backyard or it's close to my property. What can I do back there? Can I plant trees? Can I build sheds? All kinds of different questions. And they can be difficult to respond to because there's a lot of differences in what's behind the areas. Staff doesn't necessarily know right away what is that area? What's the reason for a conservation area sign there? And so it's hard to get people answers quickly and I think easily, which prompted this discussion a little bit. And so, to that end, I was asked to help create this draft document, which, I think we would admit doesn't really create new rules or new policy. What it's really meant to do is sort of memorialize the existing rules and the existing policy. And so, a copy of the draft policy is in the packet, and it really is it has a few components. One, it just provides an overview of what these areas are, sort of what I just talked about. It shows a map of all the existing signed conservation areas throughout the city. There are areas that don't necessarily have signage that could have signage. In other words, there might be bluff areas, bluff setbacks, bluff buffers that are not identified with signage just because it would be probably an expensive and time-consuming endeavor for staff to go locate every possible area where these signs would be installed if these areas were being developed, today. And then it has a couple policy directives at the end, which again is consistent with existing state and local regulations. For example, if it's on city property and it's a stormwater pond, people shouldn't go onto our property. I mean, that can create a handful of issues with liability. We also have MS4 permitting requirements. The city has to maintain these stormwater ponds to a certain standard, and we don't want people in and around those areas to interfere with that. You see Aaron nodding his head, which is always a good sign. He agrees with that. And then, for example, with these bluff areas, some of those signs are actually, toward the back in people's yards. They're areas that are not necessarily delineating private from city-owned property, but, in Brookview, for example, and in a couple other developments, the way the lots are configured is there are actually bluff buffers and bluff setbacks that sort of bleed into people's backyards, into their lots. So we put signs there to show them, here's where that area starts, and you can't make a lot of improvements back there. There are some ability in your bluff ordinance to do certain things depending on, whether they get a conditional use permit and if they meet other requirements, but it's really an educational thing. We want to make sure that people don't lose sight of the fact that these are protected areas and that there's very strict limitations for these areas. And so, again, the purpose really is, I think, to have something for staff to look at, and also for staff to be able to point to and show somebody when they're asking, can we do this, and if not, why? They could go through all the ordinances and MS4 permitting rules and say, here's why, but I just think that those things sort of change over time and they're moving targets, so it's nice to have a document that just confirms, here's what these areas are, and the reasons you can't do things or you're highly limited in these areas is because of this. Councilmember Bursch?
Yeah, how often does a conservation area occur on a private property?
I have one.
Do you?
Yeah.
I think though it occurs before they acquire the property.
So here's the context. So with Brookview, this was a highly limited site due to bluffs and things, and that's that red area right there.
Bluff along all these houses along here have very steep bluff, right? The trail going down on Snake, right? That's
Let's
steep.
have Dave answer.
And that developer chose to configure lots in a way that actually incorporated part of those bluff setbacks into the lots because it gave them more flexibility to have some decent size lots or better than they could have otherwise done and maybe squeeze more lots into a site. And so we just want to make sure that not only the developer, when they platted the property and developed it, was okay with it, but they're agreeing that anyone who in the future buys that lot is gonna be subject to the same rules.
Thank you.
There are also a couple, one or two HOA-owned outlots that have stormwater features within them, and the reason they're not city-owned is because the HOA relies on those areas for stormwater reuse for irrigation. They irrigate their property, and so they, through negotiated agreements with, I think, the watershed management organization, have an ability to own it and use it and maintain it. The city still maintains it as well, but they've got some rights, and that's why they own it. So, again, that's kind of the background of the draft policy and the desire for it. There are also, sort of as a secondary consideration here, there's 3 options for signage. When we started this discussion, we thought to ourselves, why do we use the same sign regardless of the features? Maybe we can try to do a better job of creating a way to inform people what sorts of conservation areas these signs are showing. And rather than buying new signs, which can be expensive, Bolton and Mink helped create a couple of sample stickers that can be placed over existing signs at a much more reasonable price. I assume we can keep the signage in, but we can get these stickers ordered. And so we thought maybe the council would want to take a look at these 3 options and decide which of the 3 is preferred, because, you know, I think the policy would be really helpful, but, you know, if for any reason the council doesn't want to move forward with the policy, the stickers would be a great thing to use regardless. And if we have the policy and the stickers, I think that would be best. So,
Just one add on, like, for me, like, this is just as big of probably a communication issue than it is really anything, because as Dave mentioned, each of these areas can be different, and so we have a whole spectrum of, some folks kind of view it as their backyard and would like to be able to make betterments, but there are unintended consequences to that. But then other folks think of that conservation area, think of like a DNR conservation area where, like, not just can they not go on it, but no one can go on it, not even the city. And so we want to be on a path to, like, explaining it, and I would offer this as like some parallel vibes to the public or private infrastructure policy that the council adopted about a year ago. Like, we got the questions on a somewhat regular basis, but I know there's been probably at least 3 or 4 times where the mayor has shared that policy with somebody. And isn't everybody going to universally agree to it? Maybe not, but, like, I know our team and the mayor and maybe others of you have, like, been able to share that out. And right now when someone's asking us, like, what can I do with it? It's all kind of anecdotal, just based on whoever they're talking to, and this kind of coalesces the council's viewpoint of this, and we can kind of get all on the same page. We even talked about putting a QR code that would take them to a link on the website where they could look up, you know, specifically the policy if they wanted to. So just wanted to add that little piece of information.
It's funny you say that, because I wrote down private infrastructure. I shared rent just this last weekend. Somebody reached out and said, hey, how about if we donate our playground to the city? And it was nice to be able to say, sorry, we have a policy for this. Here's where you can find it. It was adopted a year ago, and this isn't what you're going to want to hear, but we don't take those kinds of donations. I think that this is good to have it written down as a policy for exactly the same kind of reasons, so that if any of us are asked when we're out on a walk or at Target, or when staff gets these calls, that we're able to say, this is the policy, we're sorry, but no, you can't plant a tree, put a playground, whatever back there. As far as the signs, I like the color coding, but I think just the straight option number 2 in the middle there, conservation area, is just the easiest, most straightforward to understand.
So we would have bluffs, we would have one that's safe for the bluffs, a separate one that's safe for the wetlands.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
All right. Speed round. Go.
Could somebody have more than one conservation area? Because then we'd have to look at a different
don't
option.
think there are, if,
Maybe not to be answered, but I lean towards that first one, the color coding. More, the whole bunch, if there's that. But no, I totally support this.
like within walking distance of my house, years ago, it was, well, our realtor told us that was a,
Yeah.
and yet we all have a story about that, so.
Yeah.
I really think this will help that communication piece, so. Here, good.
I support having the policy in place, and something to refer to. I can't imagine these stickers are a huge cost to us, right? And are we getting enough calls that necessitate signage change?
Yes.
We are.
This, it comes up on a really,
Okay.
especially in the summer, a regular basis. But the cost and frankly just the time of like attaching a sign, I think it becomes a little bit of a challenge. Where if we could just have a map and have a sticker put on it, I think it becomes a little bit more time effective.
If I have to choose a sticker, I'd say the middle one is probably better. The colors will fade over time. You won't be able to distinguish a color, so middle sticker.
All right, Christie.
Sorry, you're good?
I'm good.
Okay, sorry.
I'm fine with all of it. I am very torn between all of the stickers. I like the colors. I actually do like the color one. I do think the red might be a little aggressive if you're gonna go that route. But I am, the only one I don't probably care for is the first one. I'm fine with 2 or 3.
Yeah, I'm fine with 2 or 3. And then just maybe for Dave, so what's the difference between a policy and like a statute, right? Because these are already existing like statutes. It's just like a city adopted summary,
Yeah,
basically, or
Yeah, I mean, normally policy would be guidelines for staff to follow and to sort of use it to provide, I think, direction to homeowners or other residents when they
Okay.
come and ask for questions. Now, you're not doing any legislative
okay.
act here. This is more giving staff what we're hoping to have, and that's just a tool, not only to use, but to educate
Okay.
for people, so.
Okay, good, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I guess if I had to pick, I'd probably like 3 better, but 2's fine.
Okay. I think
Fine.
the majority is.
It's 2, sounds like 2
really
is.
I think the colors will fade over time.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I absolutely
I like
agree,
that.
and then I was like, yeah, you're right.
I would like to know if it could be one or more of the 3. Could it be 1 and?
Yeah, I don't believe so. I mean, we have an
I don't- I
inventory,
can't
and
think of
even if it could, I think what we could do is do like in the middle there, it says stormwater pond /
Yeah.
drainage area. We could add another slash and put wetland or something. I don't think we'll have to do that, but it'll be simple enough and cheap enough that we'll probably be able to
Slash, yeah.
customize that, so.
Yes.
So that's really helpful, and I think the plan would be to bring it back for adoption at the next meeting, so.
Yeah. I think this is great.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
good.
such a backup to be able to just be like, here's our policy.
Sounds good. You're welcome.
All right, city manager's report.
Good to defer.
Okay. Don't wanna do lightning round. Okay, council requests? Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, motion
I'll
to
second.
adjourn. From Hirschman, second from Miles. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Is green sand really green, or do we just call it that?
How long have you been waiting to ask that?
Where is it from? Sheboygan? Is there a